This is NEGOTIATEx TV.
Piece. I've talked to a number of folks how they're doing. You were there, Nolan, for 4 times. What can you tell me about the relationships that you built with Afghan partners?
Yeah, so it takes me back kind of to my first deployment to southern Afghanistan. I was just a second lieutenant, a little platoon leader, brand new green into the Army. And actually the first time I started leading soldiers, like there was no training before it. I was thrown right into the mix when we were in southern Afghanistan. So basically, I remember us basically living in a platoon outpost, which just means like a small, isolated, just 30 to 40 of my soldiers. And there was about 15 Afghanistan National Army with us, and then probably about 10 Afghanistan National Police, all living in this small, basically fortified courtyard. And everyone just kind of threw up a shade, and we just slept in open cots out in the middle of the desert. And so when you're sitting there and you're just focused on securing and going out and talking to village elders, there's also a lot of time that you have to kill. And so a lot of time we spent directly with our partners, with our linguists, and just building those relationships. I mean, it goes back to the saying of breaking bread with your counterpart, especially in Afghanistan. And so, I mean, they'd invite, myself and a few other leaders over on the occasion to have some chicken or some goat, which was just at the time just phenomenal to sit there. And I mean, everyone digs in, pulls off their food. I mean, it's definitely a different experience than we're used to, but being in that culture, spending that time with them, and really getting to know and build those relationships has just been definitely a major, definitely has changed the way that I've viewed the world outside of the United States.
Yeah, I think it's so important. When we wrote the article back in 2010, based on my deployment that year, and we talked about some of the observations. This idea of really living with people that we are engaged in problem solving with, and getting into their world, and what you described there is such a beautiful example. I believe that it has corporate translations of meeting people in their offices and their place, and really understanding them and building that relationship, and the power of breaking bread and eating a meal together, and how tremendously impactful that is. And it's the importance of the casual conversation as well, and understanding people's motivations. I will say that the Afghan people and my friends who so graciously hosted me, their generosity was beyond none. I've been better treated by some Afghans than I've been treated by own members of my family. And so it's I remember when I was there for my deployment in 2011 to 12, my third deployment on April 15th, 2012, there was a simultaneous attack on both the Afghan parliament and on the Green Zone. And we were out meeting with some Afghans in Kabul at the time. And so we had to break off our meeting. We started to head back towards the Green Zone to ISAF headquarters. Couldn't get back because everything got locked up. So we had to take cover at a hotel and wait for things to calm down. And the first folks to reach out were my Afghan friends that we had just left, and said, "You need to come back to our office. We'll take care of you. We'll protect you. Make sure you're fine and safe." And I knew that was true. It wasn't what we ended up doing, but I knew that I would be entirely safe, and that they would die if need be, for me and for the 2 other officers I was with at the time. And that's to me, that willingness to really sacrifice went both ways. And I think that's part of the narrative that's been missing over the last couple of weeks too, as I've heard different leaders go on and talk about how we were fighting their war, or we're the ones making the sacrifice. It is such a false narrative, and it's such a misunderstanding of what we who lived and served there saw on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I think and it extends beyond just the Afghanistan National Army, Afghanistan National Police, our direct partners, but also to the Afghan village elders and community. I remember, being able to take my platoon into, and that's probably, again, that's like a group of 30 to 40 soldiers. We're usually walking around on foot at the time in southern Afghanistan, and we'd walk into a village and we'd just be able to say like, hey, I'd love to talk to the village elder. I mean, my interpreter would then talk to one of the males in the village, and then in no less than 30 minutes, there would be a group of 30 to, like, every single male in that village would take the time from what they were doing. They'd stop working their fields. They'd stop whatever they were doing to come have a meeting. And we would just really just talk and see how everything was doing. It was nothing of, I didn't have a specific agenda, but for them to just do that, it just shows the amount of, literally the, where I'm trying to go with this.
Yeah, care, the concern, the engagement.
Just, yeah.
I mean, there's a narrative out there which we have talked ourselves into now, over the course of 2 decades, which is the Afghans didn't want us there. And again, that's not consistent with what you're describing, Nolan. With where there were these meetings and gatherings and discussions, and there were and then taking those and actually taking action. There was there was genuine relationship and trust building, despite the fact that throughout the 20 years, we had senior leaders, of both political parties and of different backgrounds, constantly talking about how next year we're going to leave you. And you think about what that creates in terms of the dynamic for a relationship. If I were working with a supplier or a client and say, all right, I'll stick with you one more year, but next year we're breaking this off. Next year we're breaking this off. And you do that for 20 years and you truly affect the psyche. This was always in Afghanistan, right? This was a long-term problem. And I think sometimes when we get into negotiation or influence situations, anywhere we're trying to problem solve, it is really easy to not test our assumptions and to take a short-sighted view of the problem. And I think that's always a danger. And that was going to be a danger here in Afghanistan. And the work that you're describing was with a long-term focus. And I think service members understood that this was never going to be a quick fix.